You've all had experience in Congress, and now you're standing for election in the Senate, having served in the lower house. Are you better able to achieve your goals in the Senate than you are in the Congress? Is there something that stops the Congress from working effectively to achieve the goals that you've laid out tonight?
I think by its very nature of being by the number of members of the House of Representatives, to get a general consensus is much more difficult. And certainly one voice out of, what will it be next year, 200 plus congressmen, is much harder to hear than one voice amongst 24. And furthermore, I was congressman from 92 to 95, and I detect a trend in Congress and a change in the time of Congress then and it is now, wherein before, congressmen were very much individuals, in that they may be loosely affiliated to different parties, but they were still able to speak their mind and take positions that maybe were not always consistent with the powers, with the party line. However, that has become less and less. That has become less so. And in Congress right now, it is very much drawn along partisan lines, and that is certainly not the case in the Senate. And so in the Senate, I think there is much more opportunity to take personal positions and to stand by your principled ideas, and in that way foster greater change and greater progress in being able to better define what you feel needs to be done, whereas rather than taking some kind of general nebulous party line, which you're forced to in the House of Representatives.
This question is directed to Bongbong. How do you react to accusations that Senator Villar is spending so much money for his election and he seems to be buying Malacanang?
That Senator Manny Villar is being very careful to make sure that he stays within the delineated bounds of what is allowed spending. And so I cannot see, as far as I know, there is only one candidate who was declared by the COMELEC as having overspent, and it was not Senator Manny Villar. So I think that he's doing a fine job. He needs to get his message across, and he will use every means. Part of them, some of that is to spend money to get your message across. And if that's what is necessary, then certainly a candidate should do it. And as long as you stay within, as I said, the bounds laid out by law, then I think the playing field.
This is for Mr. Marcos. You know, Philippine society has been very kind and genteel to your family, thanks to democracy and good lawyers. What have you learned from your father that you would not want to see repeated when you become senator?
There's something about my father in the things that I will do. I simply do not think that way. I do not make decisions on the basis of what my father had done or what he shouldn't have done or what he could have done. I simply approach the problems as I see them, and for today. There are some, of course, lessons that can be learned from my father's experience, but there are general lessons, such as service to the people, continuing hard work, honesty, humility, open-mindedness. These are the lessons that I learned from my father. But the specific solutions that he brought to the problems that he faced as president probably are probably not the first solutions that would come to mind today. The world has changed a great deal. It has turned many, many times since 1986. The world is a very, very different place from what it was then. There are things that we can do now that we couldn't have do 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago. And so we must approach every single circumstance as a singular, and not try to go back and redo and read and copy what other people have done. But we have to take the problem as it is today in the context of today's world. And so, again, the general lessons that you learn as a person of character, of being a human being, of being a public servant, those, of course, are universal and carry into any time and place. but the specific solutions, the specific actions, perhaps should be left in the past, and we should find new solutions to the problems in this new world.
When you did your 5-minute pictures, you all outlined some very worthy goals. But one of the things in the Philippines is there's a large deficit that is a struggle to keep under control. How do you finance those things like education, health, expansion of infrastructure, but keep a rein on the finances and keep the international community willing to fund a budget deficit?
Well, in my 5-minute opening remarks, I spoke mostly about reforming systems and in strengthening institutions. Of course, so this is more important. When I spoke about agriculture, I spoke about making the system more friendly to the farmer. And that doesn't necessarily need a great deal of expenditure. Secondly, when I spoke about tourism, what we are talking about is the packaging of our tourist industry. Although we have all the bits and pieces for a good tourism industry, we have not yet been able to put them together in a cohesive way so as to be attractive to the tourists that are coming to Southeast Asia. And education and, of course, in infrastructure, this will need a great deal of expenditure. That expenditure can, of course, come, first of all, from the savings if we follow the idea that corruption is sapping and taking away close to half of what our funding is for all kinds of projects. And if we can return just just some of that to the national coffers to be spent once again on good programs and good projects, then that is an immediate source of further funds. We talk about the normal agencies we look to are the BIR, the customs, and again, it's corruption that really we were talking about here. So if we take care of corruption, many of those sources of funds will become clearer, and we will get what is rightly belonging to government. I also spoke about FDIs, and it is an important element in any plan that we would have to make. It's foreign direct investment into the Philippines. We have to fix, once again, our institutions, our financial institutions, our government institutions, and just the general institutions to be strengthened so they are not colored by political events, but continue to function as institutions, whoever is sitting as president and whoever the high officials are. If we are able to do that, then investors will come back to the Philippines, and that will be another enormous source of funds. The projection was that over the next 10 years, if we do it properly, then FDIs will amount to close to $75 billion. And I think that will be sufficient to fund any of the measures that I proposed in my speech.
Well, you might not like this question, Tony, but my question was, you all spoke about the need to take corruption on and reduce it. How and where do you start?
And there are measures that are being used in other countries. It's called quantitative legislation. And the quantitative legislation is really very simple, where you legislate the actual amount of goods that are received by the government for a particular price. So, for X million pesos, you expect to receive a certain number of kilometers of road, of certain width, of a certain thickness. And any contractor that receives a contract and builds that road and does not conform to those specifications will not only not be paid, but will be in violation of a law. And that way we can make it very, very clear that there cannot be any overprice, there cannot be any ghost deliveries. And that is one measure that I think should be examined. There's a great deal of work involved in doing this, but it is something that we can see that if we enact it into a law, and those specific volumes and specific quantities are specified in the law, then that will go a long way into discouraging people from even trying and catching those who will try.